The year was 2347, and humanity had finally achieved what generations had dreamed of. After centuries of looking up at the stars and wondering if they were alone, they had their answer. They were not alone. The galaxy was full of life, full of civilizations far older and more advanced than Earth could ever imagine. First contact had happened 60 years ago, when a trading vessel had stumbled upon a human colony ship near the edge of the solar system. There were peaceful merchants, tall and thin with skin that shimmered like liquid silver. They had been surprised to find another intelligent species so far from the galactic center, but they had been friendly enough to establish communication. Through humanity learned about the Galactic Council. It was an ancient organization, founded over 3,000 years ago by the 12 most powerful species in the known galaxy. The Council maintained peace, regulated trade, and protected its member species from external threats. To join the Council was to gain access to technology, resources, and protection that independent species could only dream of. For 60 years, humanity had worked toward that goal. They had followed every rule, met every requirement, and proven themselves to be civilized and worthy of membership. They had sent diplomats, scientists, and cultural ambassadors to Council space. They had opened their borders to trade and welcomed alien visitors to Earth. And finally, after 6 decades of effort, the Council had extended an invitation. Admiral Cole remembered the day the message arrived. He had been stationed at Luna Base, overseeing the construction of Earth's battleship. The communication had come through on priority channels, marked with the golden seal of the Galactic Council. Humanity's application for provisional membership has been approved, the message read. To complete the process, Earth must demonstrate its commitment to galactic security by contributing forces to the ongoing conflict with the Dominion Empire. Full membership will be granted upon successful completion of this obligation. The Dominion. Even 60 years of limited contact with galactic civilization had taught humanity to fear that name. The Dominion was an empire of conquest, ruled by a species called the. They were brutal, aggressive, and utterly without mercy. For the past century, they had been expanding their territory, swallowing independent worlds and threatening Council space. The Council needed soldiers, and humanity, eager to prove itself, had volunteered to provide them. Cole had been promoted to admiral and given command of the entire human fleet. 3,000 ships, the largest armada Earth had ever assembled. Carriers, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and frigates. 2 million men and women in uniform, ready to fight and die for humanity's place among the stars. He remembered standing on the bridge of his flagship, the carrier Resolute, watching as the fleet assembled in orbit around Mars. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. 3,000 vessels, their hulls gleaming in the light of the distant sun, their crews filled with hope and determination. "We're making history today," Cole had told his senior officers. "Everything our ancestors dreamed of, everything we've worked for, it all comes down to this. We're going to show the galaxy what humanity can do." Captain Lisa Grant had been there, commanding the carrier Endeavour. She was 38 years old, with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too much combat. She had risen through the ranks faster than anyone in the fleet, not because of politics or connections, but because she was simply the best. Her tactical instincts were legendary, and her crews would follow her into hell itself. "The Council's intelligence reports say the Dominion has massed their fleet at there," Lisa had said during the briefing. "They're expecting an attack. Our job is to hit them hard and fast, destroy their command structure, and end this war before it can spread any further." "What about Council reinforcements?" Commander Bell had asked. He was Lisa's executive officer, a tall man with a calm demeanor that hid a sharp tactical mind. "The reports say we'll have support from at least 5 Council species." "They are sending 200 ships," Cole had confirmed. "The collective is contributing 300 drone carriers. They have promised their entire battle fleet, another 500 vessels. Combined with our forces and the other Council contributions, will outnumber the Dominion 3-1. It had sounded perfect. A decisive battle that would end the war and secure humanity's place in the galactic community. The Council's intelligence had been detailed and specific. The Dominion fleet numbered approximately 4,000 ships concentrated around there. With nearly 12,000 Allied vessels, victory seemed certain. They had been fools. The jump to Dominion space took 3 days. Cole spent most of that time reviewing tactical data and meeting with his commanders. Every ship captain had been briefed on the battle plan. Human forces would form the vanguard, engaging the enemy first and drawing their attention. Council reinforcements would then strike from the flanks, catching the Dominion in a classic pincer movement. Lisa had expressed concerns during one of the private briefings. "Something doesn't feel right," she told Cole. "The Council has been fighting the Dominion for decades. Why are they suddenly putting us at the front of the assault?" "We volunteered," Cole reminded her. "We wanted to prove ourselves." "I know, but look at these deployment orders. We're not just at the front. We're isolated. The nearest Council forces will be 6 hours away at combat speed. If anything goes wrong, we'll be on our own." Cole had considered her words carefully. Lisa was not the type to worry without reason. But in the end, he had decided to trust the Council. They had been fighting wars across the galaxy for 3,000 years. They knew what they were doing. "We'll be fine," he had told her. "The Council wouldn't send us into a trap. We're too valuable to waste." Those words would haunt him for the rest of his life. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Dominion system. For a moment, everything seemed normal. The enemy hung in the distance, a dark sphere against the backdrop of stars. Sensor contacts began appearing on screens throughout the fleet. And then the numbers started climbing. "Admiral," the sensor officer on the Resolute said, his voice trembling, "we're detecting enemy vessels, lots of them." "How many?" Cole asked. "Still counting, sir. 2,000, 5,000, 8,000. The officer looked up, his face pale with fear. Over 20,000 confirmed contacts and still climbing. Cole felt the blood drain from his face. 20,000 ships, 5 times what the intelligence reports had predicted. This wasn't a battle, it was an execution. "Get me Council command," he ordered, "now." The communication took precious minutes to establish. When it finally connected, Cole found himself facing Counselor, the serpentine being who led the military committee. The alien scales shimmered in the light of his chamber, and his expression was impossible to read. "Counselor, we need immediate reinforcement," Cole said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "The enemy fleet is 5 times larger than projected. We cannot engage without support." "I understand your concern," Admiral replied. His translator gave his voice a cold, mechanical quality. "However, the Allied fleet has been delayed. You must engage the enemy and draw their attention until reinforcements arrive." "Delayed how long?" "Approximately 18 hours." 18 hours, against 20,000 enemy ships with no support. Cole understood then, with horrible clarity, exactly what was happening. "You knew," he said quietly. "You knew the Dominion had moved their fleet here. You knew we'd be outnumbered." Scales rippled. Was it amusement, contempt? Cole couldn't tell. "The Dominion represents a significant threat to galactic stability," the counselor said. "Your forces will serve an important purpose. The enemy will expend significant resources destroying your fleet. This will weaken them for the main assault. You're using us as bait." "I am using you as the tools you volunteered to be. The Council thanks humanity for its sacrifice. Your names will be remembered." The connection terminated. Cole stood frozen for a long moment. Around him, the bridge crew stared at their consoles, processing what they had just heard. In the distance, the Dominion fleet was forming into attack formations. They had perhaps an hour before engagement. Admiral, his communications officer looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. What do we do? Cole turned to face the main display. 3,000 human ships against 20,000 enemy vessels. No reinforcements. No escape route. They had been sent here to die, sacrificed by the very beings they had trusted to guide them into the galactic community. For a moment, rage threatened to consume him. He wanted to scream, to curse the Council and everything they represented. He wanted to order a retreat, to run and damn the consequences. But he was an admiral of the United Earth Navy. 2 million lives depended on his decisions. If he lost control now, everyone would die. Signal all ships, Cole said, his voice flat and cold. Inform them of the situation. Tell them the truth. Then ask for volunteers to cover the evacuation. We're getting as many people out of here as we can. Sir, the enemy will intercept any ships that try to run. I know. That's why we need volunteers to buy time. The message went out. And despite everything, despite knowing they had been betrayed and abandoned, not a single ship volunteered to flee. Instead, captain after captain reported in, pledging to stand and fight. If we're going to die, Lisa Grant said over the command channel, then we're going to make them remember us. We're going to hurt them so badly that they'll never forget the day they faced humanity. Cole closed his eyes. He had never been more proud or more heartbroken. All ships, he said, battle formation. Let's show these bastards what humans are made of. The Battle of Dominion Prime would later be recorded as the bloodiest engagement in galactic history. 3,000 human ships against a fleet 7 times their size. The odds were impossible. The outcome was predetermined. But what happened in those 3 days of fighting would change the galaxy forever. The Dominion expected an easy victory. They had crushed dozens of species over their centuries of conquest. Humanity was young, inexperienced, and hopelessly outmatched. Their commanders predicted the battle would be over within hours. They were wrong. The first human tactic was something the Dominion had never encountered. Instead of forming traditional battle lines, the human fleet split into hundreds of small squadrons. Each squadron operated independently, striking at the edges of the Dominion formation, and then retreating before the enemy could concentrate fire. It was chaos, organized, purposeful chaos. The Dominion commanders tried to coordinate their massive fleet, but human ships were everywhere at once. For every vessel they destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear from another direction. Their formation began to fragment as ships broke off to pursue individual targets. Lisa Grant commanded her squadron from the bridge of the Endeavor. Her carriers launched wave after wave of fighters, small craft that could slip through enemy fire and deliver precise strikes against critical systems. Within the first hour, her pilots had disabled 3 Dominion cruisers by targeting their engines and weapon systems. Keep moving, she ordered her captains. Never let them get a clear shot, make them chase us. The Dominion was used to enemies who fought in formation, who presented clear targets and followed predictable patterns. Human tactics were different, unpredictable, almost suicidal in their aggression. But despite their success, the humans were dying. Every hour brought more losses. The carrier Resolution was destroyed when it was caught between 2 enemy battleships. The cruiser Miami was torn apart by massed missile fire. The frigate Houston made a desperate ramming attack against a Dominion command ship, sacrificing itself to take out a key enemy commander. Lieutenant Daniel Foster commanded the Houston. He was 23 years old, fresh out of the academy. When his ship lost power and began drifting toward the enemy formation, he made a choice that would become legend. "All hands abandon ship," he announced over the intercom. His voice was steady, almost calm. "Get to the escape pods, that's an order." His crew obeyed. Within minutes, the Houston was empty except for Foster and a skeleton crew of volunteers who had refused to leave. Together, They redirected all remaining power to the engines and aimed their crippled ship at the largest Dominion vessel they could see. "Earth remembers," Foster said as his ship accelerated toward its target. "Tell them we never gave up." The Houston struck the Dominion carrier Executor amidships, its reactor detonating on impact. The explosion destroyed both vessels and damaged 3 others nearby. 47 crew members from the Houston's escape pods were later recovered. They would spend the rest of their lives telling the story of Lieutenant Daniel Foster. By the end of the first day, humanity had lost 400 ships, but they had destroyed nearly 1,000 enemy vessels, a ratio that should have been impossible given the odds. Dominion commanders were shocked. They had expected to crush these primitive newcomers within hours. Instead, they were facing a battle of attrition that was costing them far more than they had anticipated. Admiral Cole coordinated the defense from the Resolute. He barely slept, managing dozens of simultaneous engagements while trying to keep track of his shrinking fleet. Every hour brought new reports of losses, new lists of ships destroyed and crews killed. But also, impossibly, new victories. The destroyer Bradley had been cornered by 5 Dominion ships. Instead of surrendering, her captain had ordered a full torpedo spread at point-blank range, destroying 2 enemies before his own vessel was torn apart. The cruiser Portland had lost all its weapons but continued to serve as a decoy, drawing enemy fire away from more capable ships until it finally succumbed. The frigate Atlanta had rescued the crews of 3 disabled vessels before being destroyed itself, saving over 1,000 lives through the sacrifice of its own. Stories like these spread through the fleet, carried by desperate communications and dying transmissions. Every act of heroism inspired others. Every sacrifice gave meaning to those still fighting. By the second day, humanity had lost over half its fleet, but the Dominion had lost nearly 3,000 ships, casualties they had never expected. Their commanders began to reconsider their strategy. These humans were not like the other species they had conquered. They did not surrender. They did not flee. They fought until their ships were destroyed, and even then they found ways to keep fighting. Commander was a fighter pilot, one of the best in the fleet. When her carrier was destroyed, she and her squadron were left stranded in enemy territory with no home to return to. Most pilots would have tried to escape, had a different idea. "We've got enough fuel and ammunition for maybe 18 hours of combat," she told her surviving pilots. "We can try to run, or we can make those 18 hours count. What do you say?" They voted to fight. For the next 18 hours, the squadron harried the Dominion fleet without rest. They struck at supply ships and damaged vessels. They intercepted enemy fighters and disrupted communications. They became ghosts, appearing from nowhere to strike and then vanishing before the enemy could respond. Herself shot down 112 enemy craft during that endless day of combat. When her ammunition finally ran dry, she did not stop. She identified a Dominion carrier that was coordinating attacks against the human fleet and aimed her fighter at its bridge. Her last transmission was calm, almost peaceful. "Tell my family I love them. Tell Earth we did everything we could." Her fighter struck the carrier at full speed. The impact destroyed the bridge and killed the enemy commander aboard. It was a small victory, perhaps, but in a battle measured by small victories, it mattered. By the third day, humanity was dying. Of the original 3,000 ships, fewer than 200 remained operational. The Dominion had lost nearly 5,000 vessels, a staggering toll that had shocked their high command. But they had ships to spare. Humanity did not. Admiral Cole made the decision to retreat. There was no shame in it, not anymore. They had fought harder and longer than anyone had expected. They had hurt the enemy badly. Now it was time to save whoever could be saved. "All ships capable of hyperspace jump, prepare for immediate evacuation," he ordered. "We're going home." 53 ships made the jump. They left behind hundreds of escape pods, thousands of survivors floating in the wreckage of the battle. Most would be captured by the Dominion. Some would be killed. A few would manage to drift long enough to be rescued later. Lisa Grant was among those who escaped. Her carrier had been destroyed in the second day of fighting, but she had managed to transfer to a surviving cruiser before the end. She stood on the bridge as the stars blurred around them, watching the battlefield disappear. "How many did we lose?" she asked quietly. "Current estimates are approximately 800,000 killed or captured," the ship's captain replied, "out of 2 million personnel." 800,000. The number was too large to comprehend. Lisa tried to picture that many people and failed. She could only see faces. Daniel Foster. The hundreds of captains and crews she had known personally. "The Council will answer for this," she said. "I swear it." The survivors returned to Earth as heroes. Crowds gathered to welcome them home, to honor those who had given their lives. The government declared a day of mourning, and memorials were built across the planet. But beneath the grief, something else was growing. Anger, fury, a cold, burning rage that demanded satisfaction. The truth about the Council's betrayal had spread quickly. Communications intercepts from the battle had been analyzed and distributed. Counselor's words played on every news feed, his casual dismissal of human lives echoing across the planet. "The Council thanks humanity for its sacrifice. Your names will be remembered." Protests erupted in every major city. Citizens demanded answers, demanded justice, demanded revenge. The Earth government found itself facing a population united in fury, a people transformed by betrayal. Admiral Cole became the face of that transformation. He had lost everything in the battle: his flagship, his fleet, his faith in galactic civilization. But he had gained something else: purpose. "We were fools," he told the assembled leaders of Earth's government. "We trusted the Council because we wanted to believe that the galaxy was governed by wisdom and justice. We were wrong. The Council is nothing more than a collection of predators, using weaker species as shields and weapons for their own protection." "What do you propose?" the president asked. "We rebuild, we strengthen, we prepare." Cole's eyes were hard as stone. "And when the time is right, we make them pay for every life they stole from us." It took 3 years. 3 years of construction, of training, of planning. Earth poured every resource into rebuilding its fleet. But this time, they did not build 3,000 ships. They built better ships, smarter ships, ships designed with the lessons of the massacre burned into every circuit. The new vessels were smaller but faster, harder to hit and deadlier in combat. They incorporated technology salvaged from the battle, reverse-engineered Dominion systems combined with human innovation. They were crewed by veterans, survivors who had seen the worst and refused to break. And they were led by officers who had learned, through terrible experience, exactly how ruthless they needed to be. Lisa Grant commanded the new carrier Defiance. It was smaller than the Endeavour but far more capable. Its fighter bays held craft that could outmaneuver anything the Dominion or the Council could field. Its weapons systems were designed for precision strikes against critical targets. Its crew was composed entirely of volunteers, men and women who had lost friends and family in the massacre. "We're not here for revenge," Lisa told her officers during their first briefing. "Revenge is personal. This is bigger than that. We're here to make sure this never happens again, to anyone." Bell served as her executive officer once more. He had aged visibly in the 3 years since the battle, his hair now streaked with gray. But his mind was as sharp as ever, and his loyalty was absolute. "The intelligence reports are confirmed," he said during one planning session. "The Dominion is vulnerable. Their losses at the battle weakened them more than they expected. Several of their subject worlds are on the verge of rebellion." And the Council? Still pretending nothing happened. "They've been telling the galaxy that we were destroyed, that humanity is no longer a factor. They think we're beaten." Lisa smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Good, let them think that. The first strike came without warning. A human squadron jumped into Dominion space and attacked a military installation that coordinated supplies for the entire sector. Within an hour, the installation was destroyed, and the squadron was gone before reinforcements could arrive. The Dominion was shocked. They had believed the humans were broken, reduced to a handful of survivors struggling to maintain there. Instead, they found themselves facing an enemy that struck without warning, without mercy, and without the limitations of council warfare. Over the following months, human ships appeared throughout Dominion territory. They destroyed supply depots, disrupted communications, and supported rebellions on occupied worlds. They avoided direct confrontation with superior forces, preferring to strike at weak points and disappear before the enemy could respond. It was the same tactic they had used at the massacre, refined and perfected. Chaos, unpredictability, constant pressure that wore down the enemy's will to fight. The Dominion tried to retaliate. They sent fleets to attack human space to punish Earth for its defiance. But the human fleet had learned patience. They did not engage on enemy terms. Instead, they ambushed Dominion forces in transit, picked off stragglers, and made every attack cost more than it gained. The war of attrition lasted 2 years. By the end, the Dominion was exhausted. Their military was stretched thin, their economy was collapsing, and their subject worlds were in open revolt. When human intelligence finally located their true, hidden behind decades of misdirection and propaganda, the end came quickly. Admiral Cole led the final assault personally. 47 ships, all that remained of humanity's rebuilt fleet, jumped into the heart of Dominion space. But this time, they were not alone. Ships from a dozen species joined them, former subjects of the Dominion who had heard the stories of human resistance and dared to hope. The Dominion High Command surrendered after 3 days of fighting. Their government collapsed, their empire fragmented into dozens of independent worlds. The war that had threatened the galaxy for a century was over, ended not by the Council's careful strategies, but by the fury of a species that had been pushed too far. And then humanity turned its attention to those who had betrayed them. The Galactic Council received warning of the human fleet's approach. They had time to prepare, time to gather their forces, time to formulate a response. But they did not understand what was coming. They could not comprehend the depth of hatred they had created. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the Resolute as his fleet entered Council space. Around him, 47 human ships were joined by vessels from a dozen other species, former subjects of both the Dominion and the Council itself. Together, they numbered nearly 500, a force that would have been laughable against the Council's combined military. But the Council's military was not combined. It was scattered across dozens of worlds, defending against threats that no longer existed. And more importantly, it was led by beings who had never faced an enemy truly willing to die. Signal from the Council station, the communications officer reported. They're demanding we stand down and submit to arbitration. Ignore them, Cole said. Maintain course. The Council station was enormous, a structure the size of a small moon that served as the seat of galactic government. Thousands of diplomats, administrators, and support staff lived and worked there. Its defense grid was formidable, capable of repelling any conventional attack. But Cole was not planning a conventional attack. Begin broadcasting the data package, he ordered. Every frequency, every receiver. Make sure the whole galaxy hears this. The package contained everything. Communications intercepts showing the Council's foreknowledge of the trap. Strategic documents proving humanity had been deliberately sacrificed. Records of similar betrayals stretching back centuries. Dozens of species used and discarded by the beings who claimed to protect them. The galaxy listened, and the galaxy believed. Within hours, communications flooded in from across Council space. Species demanded explanations. Governments their support. Military commanders refused orders to engage the human fleet. The Council's authority, built over 3,000 years of careful manipulation, began to crumble. Counselor himself appeared on the communication screens, his scales rippling with barely contained rage. "You are making a serious mistake, Admiral," he said. "Whatever grievances you believe you have, they can be addressed through proper channels. This aggression will not be tolerated." Cole leaned forward in his command chair. "Let me tell you something about grievances, Counselor. 800,000 human beings died because of your lies. 800,000 people who trusted you, who believed in your promises of protection and cooperation. They died alone, abandoned by the allies they had volunteered to serve. Sacrifices must sometimes be made for the greater good. That's what tyrants always say, but here's the thing about sacrificing others for the greater good." Cole's voice dropped to something cold and hard. "Eventually, you run out of others, and then it's your turn." He terminated the connection and turned to his tactical officer. "Are the teams in position?" "Yes, sir, standing by." "Execute." Throughout the Council station, human operatives who had infiltrated over the past year activated their equipment. Security systems went offline. Communication nodes were disrupted. Defense grids powered down. In a matter of minutes, the most protected facility in the galaxy was rendered helpless. Cole led the boarding parties personally. He walked through the corridors of the Council chamber with armed Marines at his back, past bewildered staff and terrified administrators. No one tried to stop him. There was no point. The Council was in session when he arrived. 12 species, 12 representatives, gathered around a circular table that had witnessed 3 of galactic history. They stared at him with expressions ranging from fear to contempt to something that might have been respect. "Admiral Cole," said Counselor of the Collective. Her form hummed quietly as she spoke. "This is highly irregular." "Yes," Cole agreed, "it is." He walked slowly around the chamber, looking at each counselor in turn. These were the beings who ruled the galaxy, the most powerful individuals their species had to offer, and they had sent his people to die without a moment's hesitation. "I'm not here to kill you," he said finally. "Though I'll admit the thought has appeal, I'm here to deliver a message." "And what message is that?" asked. His voice was steady, but his scales betrayed his fear. "Humanity is done with you, with all of this." Cole gestured at the chamber, at the symbols of authority that decorated its walls. "We came to you in good faith, asking for nothing more than a chance to prove ourselves. You used us and threw us away. That was your mistake." He stopped in front of Seat, close enough to see his own reflection in the counselor's cold eyes. "The data we've released shows your true nature. Every dirty secret, every betrayal, every time you've sacrificed a weaker species for your own benefit. The galaxy knows now. They know what you really are." "You think this changes anything?" hissed. "Species have known the truth for centuries. It never mattered before." "It matters now, because now they have an alternative." Cole turned to address the entire council. "Humanity is founding a new alliance, the Free Worlds Compact. Any species that wants to join is welcome. The only rule is simple: we stand together or we fall together. No member will ever be sacrificed for another. No species will be used as a shield or a weapon." "You're naive," another counselor said. "Such idealism cannot survive contact with reality." "Maybe, but at least we're going to try, which is more than you ever did." Cole nodded to his Marines, who began withdrawing from the chamber. "The Dominion is defeated. The war you used us to fight is over. Now you'll have to find another species to sacrifice, though I suspect that's going to be harder than it used to be." He paused at the entrance to the chamber. "One more thing. If any council species attacks a member of the compact, we will respond. Together, all of us. We've already proven that we don't know how to give up. Keep that in mind before you try anything stupid." Then he was gone. The Galactic Council formally dissolved 3 months later. 17 member species had withdrawn, citing the revelations of Cole's data broadcast. Several others had applied to join the Free Worlds Compact, seeking protection from former allies who now viewed them as threats. Counselor was found dead in his quarters 2 weeks after the confrontation. Official reports called it natural causes. No one believed them. His own species had turned against him, blaming him for the disaster that had cost them their position in galactic affairs. Admiral Cole did not live to see the Compact's first anniversary. The wounds he carried from the massacre, both physical and psychological, finally claimed him. He died peacefully, surrounded by the officers who had followed him through hell and back. But his legacy endured. The Free Worlds Compact grew rapidly in its first years. Species that had lived in fear of the Council or the Dominion found a new option, an alliance that valued them for themselves rather than their usefulness. Human diplomats, once mocked as naive newcomers, became respected mediators and strategists. Lisa Grant became the Compact's first Supreme Commander, leading a combined fleet that eventually numbered over 1,000 vessels. She never forgot the lessons of the massacre. Every officer who served under her learned them as well. "We trust no one blindly," she told each new class of cadets. "We verify everything. We prepare for betrayal even from those we call friends. Not because we expect the worst of everyone, but because we've seen what happens when we don't." Bell served as her chief of staff until his retirement. He spent his final years writing a history of the war, a comprehensive account of every battle, every sacrifice, every act of heroism and betrayal. It became required reading in academies across the compact. "We were fools once," he wrote in the book's conclusion. "We believed what we wanted to believe and ignored the warnings that should have been obvious. 800,000 people paid for that mistake with their lives. We honor their memory not with monuments or speeches, but with vigilance, with the promise that we will never be deceived again." Earth itself was transformed by the experience. The planet that had once looked to the stars with hope now looked with caution. They still dreamed of exploration, of discovery, of meeting new species and learning new things, but they no longer assumed that those they met would share their values. And they never, ever forgot what had been done to them. Monuments were built across the planet and throughout human space. The largest stood on Luna, a massive wall of black stone engraved with the names of every person who had died in the massacre. 800,000 names, covering acres of polished surface. Visitors came from across the compact to pay their respects, to trace their fingers over the carved letters to remember. At the wall's center, a single quote was inscribed in letters large enough to be seen from orbit. "We came in peace, we left in fury. We returned in strength, remember us." The galaxy did remember. For centuries afterward, the story of humanity's betrayal and resurrection was told throughout known space. It became a warning to those who would manipulate the weak, and an inspiration to those who refused to surrender. The Council had thought they were using humanity as a tool, a disposable weapon to be pointed at their enemies and discarded when broken. They had not understood what they were creating. In the fires of betrayal, humanity had been forged into something new, something stronger, something that would never again trust blindly, never again follow without question, never again assume that power implied wisdom. They had become exactly what the Council had feared, not a threat to galactic security, a threat to the entire system of manipulation and sacrifice that had governed the galaxy for 3,000 years. And in the end, that threat had brought it all crashing down. The last surviving member of the original Council, an artificial intelligence called gave an interview shortly before her core was deactivated for age-related degradation. The reporter asked her what she thought had been the Council's greatest mistake. "We underestimated them," said. "We saw their short lives and assumed they lacked patience. We saw their individual weakness and assumed they lacked strength. We saw their optimism and assumed they lacked wisdom." And what did you learn? That hope is not the same as naivety. That kindness is not the same as weakness. That a species capable of great trust is also capable of great fury when that trust is betrayed. She paused, her mechanical systems humming as she processed memories 3 centuries old. "We thought we were the masters of the galaxy. We thought we understood power and how to wield it. But we had forgotten something important." What was that? That true power is not found in fleets or weapons or political alliances. True power is found in those who refuse to surrender, no matter the odds, who keep fighting when all hope seems lost, who turn their defeats into victories through sheer force of will. Optical sensors flickered. The humans taught us that lesson. They taught the entire galaxy, and it is a lesson that will be remembered long after the Council itself has been forgotten. The interview ended there. Was deactivated 3 days later, her core memory preserved in the archives of the Free Worlds Compact. And humanity continued forward into a future they had earned through blood and sacrifice. A future where they stood not as beggars at the door of galactic civilization, but as equals, as leaders, as examples of what could be achieved through courage, determination, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. The Council had wanted humanity to be a weapon. In the end, they got their wish. Just not in the way they had expected.